to all of these issues um, that we'll probably talk about today. Um, so I think what I'll do is sort of give a little framing, a little bit more framing of the conversation. Um, ACF has uh, been sort of in conversation with a number of arts leaders over the past few years, um, and just building that strong connection with our local community. And in those conversations, we realized, like I think what I was trying to say before is that quite often leaders of these organizations don't get a chance to come and talk about their work, the challenges of this very difficult work, and the the things that they can celebrate. And ACF knew that we had the ability to convene and to share these stories with our community. And that's sort of how this part of our equity summit, our arts equity summit, came to be. In 2019, we had a race and equity inclusion summit in and invited people from all over the country um, to sort of talk about new music and the issues of equity and inclusion in our field. Um, and we continue to do that through our study groups that we have monthly, and we'll continue through conversations like this. There will be another equity summit that will take place in the fall, sometime in early September. So please sign up for our newsletter. Check out our website for more information on that. But today, our focus is on the Twin Cities local arts community, today and tomorrow. And we have three amazing art leaders with us today. And so, what I'm going to do is we're so lucky to have um, this group of leaders share with us a little bit about their organization in video. So, what I'm going to do is have um, play their video, um, and then um, talk a little bit about their work. So I'm going to kick it off um, by introducing everyone to uh, a good friend of mine and um, colleague, um, collaborator, all those fun words that we have. Someone that I've known for a number of years here in the Twin Cities community, um, Alejandra, um, Tobar Alatriz. And I've known Alejandra for, I don't know, I kind of think it's been maybe 2 decades or so. Um, Alejandra is a very talented, I think, I'll just say a multidisciplinary artist. Um, and I think I first sort of met her through sort of dance and movement. Um, but Alejandra is a queer immigrant organizer, creator, and performing artist who co-founded the People's Movement Center in from 2015 to 2020, which is a healing justice space center um, for BIPOC and GLBTQ bodies in South Minneapolis, Minnesota. She's a founding director at United Body Workers and Artists. She's also a board member of Indigenous Roots Cultural Art Center, which we'll hear from one of the founders there tomorrow, and a founding cooperative member with the Fields at Root Springs. It's the only Black Indigenous people of color run retreat center in Minnesota. And Alejandra brings 20 plus years experience in creating placemaking, organizational development, facilitation, and training with communities across the country. Alejandra is a storyteller and body worker. She descends from the people of Chile and Mexico and lives on the unceded traditional territories of the Dakota people here in St. Paul, Minnesota. So let's welcome Alejandra and play the video from Root Springs. the cooperative here in Minnesota.
Sorry, just give me one moment with that video. It's always a good time for deep breaths in these moments of pause as the neck.
I think you got to share your sound too.
Is the sound not working?
It's not.
Oh, okay. Let's try this one more time. Guess it's not a Zoom event if there aren't tech issues, right?
Right.
Okay.
Dreams. This is Root Springs, a retreat center on 36 acres of land, just 50 miles to the northwest of the Twin Cities. In the dead of winter, in February, 6 of us, 3 couples, boldly step forward to lovingly and respectfully steward the land, to reclaim our relationships with nature, to host our communities, to make art, to celebrate, to rest, to heal. Although it is now very cold, we look forward to things thawing around here. We are excited to learn the land's personality in each of its seasons. A spring-fed lake, a labyrinth, eco trails, a garden, a small orchard, a farmhouse and wellness center, and 3 hermitages, cottages that will host our guests. One at the rise of the hill, one in view of the lake, and one a geodesic dome that will henceforth honor an ancestor who dreamed us into the future, the Octavia E. Butler Dome. We look forward to your visits. Come and see us. Root Springs, a sacred space dedicated to healing and Black liberation.
Wow. I, I don't even know if I have to go there. That, as you were saying, Aaron's voice is so soothing. I'm already like, I feel like I'm in a better place already. But it's absolutely gorgeous land out there. And Alejandra, I wonder if you can, tell us a little bit. Your work is centered around sort of arts and body work, and sort of that healing work that you do in combination. So I wonder if your background sort of led you, to this space that you're creating with your fellow co-op members.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dameun. I think as an immigrant, I've always been aware of when I'm visiting and when I'm a settler in a new land.
Mm.
And as an interdisciplinary artist, as a multi-system thinker, as a very much a lot of earth in my planets, so I don't move without others. Like I really, collectivity and ensemble work and has always been a catalyst for movement. And when I move, I think going back to my earth, it's like I roll hard. I like belly flop into the center of the pool. And so which is what we did, farming a group of artists, finding ourselves out of work, and deciding that food security and coming together and organizing ourselves and learning how to grow food was one of the ways to stay sane, to stay related, and grounded, and also fed, right? In regards to we didn't know what was going to happen, and we wanted to care for our elders before they asked for help, before they were in a position of danger of that sort. And so it was really an early morning watering and farming sessions with other artists that we felt emboldened by this opportunity. And within less than a year of the land becoming available for sale, a group of us 6 decided to take the plunge, because we understood that though times have been critical before, that we stand, in the lineage of so many great organizing movements, that our interconnectivity, our intersectionality was so palpable, and that the systems that were keeping us, and we knew that land-based work was the next kind of paradigm shifting move, that giving ourselves and our communities a space to root was what we needed to level up, as leaders, as artists, and to dare to heal, dare to rest, dare to be with our own selves in our silence, and to give voice once we're there. And so we, within definitely, if there weren't among us people who had been readying themselves in regards to in these systems, right, of having good enough credit, having of preparing to make this kind of level of play in these systems, we definitely couldn't have done it. And also, right, again, the power of collectivity, we created a cooperative, and within 8-9 months, we bought 36 acres, and deepened our commitment to one another, deepened our commitment to the land. I think that more and more, as an arts organizer, as a cultural worker, the environmental justice really has been more and more, I felt like a healing justice, environmental justice, how the ecosystem affects how we breathe, live, make art. So those are some broad strokes response to your prompt, Dameun.
Yeah, that's amazing. The idea of sort of this collective working together and bringing together your collective knowledge to achieve this, is a remarkable. One of the things I think that we'll talk about is the importance of space, and particularly in Black and Brown or BIPOC communities. Having space, and you said it right there. You're the only retreat space in Minnesota that is run by Black and Indigenous folks. And as an artist myself, in this, who's been here for nearly 30 years, it's something that's come up so often in the conversation. So to finally see us get to a point where we do have a place like that, was so inspiring. And the work that you all are doing is very inspiring. So I want to hold on to that, because we're going to continue to talk about space and cooperatives, I think, and we're going to move on to another cooperative, um, which is Black Table Arts, and a very talented, just all around arts organizer that I got to see from a very young age, seeing him at poetry slam events, and I think working with Tru Ruts and Shay and all, and I think you did that too, Alejandra. So it's been great to see Kino, you develop your voice and your work over the years. And so we'll give you a little intro, and then move on to your video. and share a little bit about Black Table Arts um, and the work that you do. So Kino Evil is the founder and director of the Black Table Arts Cooperative located in South Minneapolis. Evil is the editor of A Garden of Black Joy, Global Poetry from the Edges of Liberation and Living. At its core, he is a facilitator of empathy and imagination, and that's very true. Kino Evol's work hones in on the literary art and the Black radical tradition as curriculum for the future. Evo has received the Verve Grant, the Beyond the Pure Fellowship, the Emerging Writers Grant, and the Spoken Word Immersion Fellowship for his work. His essays are available at mnartist.com, and we'll drop that in there, through the Walker Art Center here in Minneapolis. Well, not here in Minneapolis because I'm in St. Paul, but in Minneapolis. So we'll play a video about Black Table Arts. And I think this is CBS local report on the opening of Black Table Arts a few months ago.
Heal just as much. Twin Cities is celebrating the grand opening of a co-working space for Black artists. The Black Table Arts Cooperative sits at the corner of 37th and Minnehaha Avenue in South Minneapolis, not far from the heart of the unrest that happened following the death of George Floyd. WCCO's Muriel Mose shows us how this space will be used as a place to heal, just as much as a place to work.
Each space is named after a Black writer. So this is the little Lorraine Hansberry reading nook. On the walls,
For Kino Evol, this new space is a passion project he's been working on since 2015, when he first brought young Black artists together following the death of Michael Brown.
There was a void that needed to be filled in Black folks in Minnesota having a space to talk about our joys and our grievances.
The purpose of Black Table Arts Cooperative lies in its name, a place for Black artists to have a place at the table.
So to keep a promise to our community that we will always provide a space for you to return to.
The Black Table Arts Cooperative is located about 6 blocks away from the Minneapolis Police 3rd Precinct that was burned down in the uprising following George Floyd's death. The proximity to this location was intentional.
And grief presents an opportunity for connection, and art meets that need.
It also kind of changing the narrative of like there was so much negativity.
Alfred Sanders is the cooperative's director of operations. He's also a singer who plans to mentor and learn with other Black artists in this space, helping each other recover after a year that's put a lot of artists out of work.
With anything, you need a following, and just that this can be a great place for people to start their foundation, to get their following, or just practice their skills.
Art isn't the only draw for Sanders.
I lost my father with police brutality, very close to where George lost his life 20 years prior.
He hopes he will find healing here through art, while keeping his father's memory alive through connection. In South Minneapolis, Marielle Mose, WCCO 4 News.
The grand opening is tomorrow from 11 to 4. Anyone can come by for a COVID-safe tour and learn more about becoming a member. Is looking for book donations to fill their library with Black authors. You can also help that space by fundraising and donating online, and we have more information about that at WCCO.com.
Excellent. So as Alejandra said in the chat, it is a beautiful space. I've definitely visited, and I used to live not too far from there, and it's great to have an institution like that in that neighborhood, for sure. So Kino, again, like I said, I've seen you sort of develop as an artist over the years, and really grow into a really effective arts organizer for the community. And when you started Black Table Arts, you didn't have a space necessarily. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, the development of Black Table Art into a cooperative, and maybe talk a little bit about, why a cooperative works for this kind of space and what it means for the community around Black table art.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that introduction. You're so kind and so sweet, and I'm glad to be here with people I respect so much. And I definitely think Root Springs Co-op should definitely collaborate with Black table artists. And I would love to, and that was just a heart project. Yeah, I would love to see that happen. Yeah, so Black table art started in 2015. And it was a container to gather Black communities to sort of joy out loud our experiences and our happenings, what's happening to us, and participate in political education. And we existed in the partnerships we've had with other venues like the Lawful Literary Center, like the University of Minnesota, like Pillsbury House Theater, and the sort of ecosystems of art institutions here in the Twin Cities. So that's how we existed for 6 years. And our building is quite literally the process of an uprising. And we try to be very clear about that the financial and relational support that we got during the George Floyd uprising is the reason that this structure exists. And it's a cooperative structure because it speaks to the values of our hearts, of Black table arts, of our staff. When you walk in the main gathering area, it says cooperatives are visionary institutions that we could all create. All it takes is 3 or more people in a mutual aid relationship. So it gets at that mutual aid in the context of an uprising. And we see that as a sort of solution-oriented process in the context of a municipality. And what I mean by that is a city that's being corporatized, right? And it's very important to talk about it in those terms because the artist in the Black radical tradition says, the rent is too high, says that we actually don't have access to gardens. We need to talk about land. We need to talk about police abolition. So it's a cooperative because it speaks to our values, but also a suggestion to how we can organize. We can cooperate. We can think about other ways to distribute resources inside and outside of the state. We can teach each other. We can give each other medicine. So we can think of other ways to facilitate community safety. And we just begin at art. We begin at the poem. We begin at the painting. We begin at movement and dance. So when we thought about, okay, so how can we deepen our work and how can we provide and respond to Black folks in Minnesota, we held an event called Imagine Black Space Together. And at that event, our community said we would love a co-working space, more space. So after that event, we started to find a realtor and start to go through the process of getting a building. And so that's how we found our building in South Minneapolis. But it's really this orientation to deepen our work, to continue what we've been doing at the intersections of civic engagement, political education, and joy, and art making, and Black joy, and having fun. So we're leasing right now. We're leasing our space for 3 years. And then we're gonna sort of think about what are the other sort of options, what makes sense for us. Do we want to buy our building? Do we want to explore other sort of locations in Minneapolis? So we'll see.
Great. Well, I think I mentioned that there was so much, going on in the world. And I think that the idea of intersectionality that Alejandra, brought up, and I think it's been part of that cooperative spirit. Like one of the things, even though you developed the space as a space for Black community to get these resources, some of the stuff that you've done in the past few weeks or months, given the rise or increase in violence against our Asian American family, and and the hurt that our Palestinian family feels right now. Like you shifted some of that and opened up your space for those communities to heal. And so can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so and again, I think for us, what we're thinking about is to be a responsible organization, we have to be a responsive one. So we always have to stand ready for mutual aid. And that really could look like within 24 hours, right? So with the tragic event in Atlanta, with the shooting of our Asian and Pacific Islander community, we already had a scheduled event called We Got Us, healing from the Dante Wright shooting, and then also still grieving from the George Floyd. And then so with that, it just made sense for us to say, this is a moment for solidarity. This is a moment to really think about, why do we automatically assume there's only antagonisms between our communities? Let's actually think about it and learn about the history of Black and Brown solidarity and solidarity in general within liberation struggles. So that event, and then more recently, the event in solidarity with Palestine, again, just a moment to offer that light, that solidarity is possible, and it's more possible than we often sort of assume, and we can work through sort of our assumed antagonisms or ways to think about how to build that sort of national global solidarity. So yeah, I mean so those are some events that speak to that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
we'll get to all these connections soon, and I'm going to introduce David Hamilton next, and who's the executive director of the Cedar Cultural Center, and that is a space that has existed for quite some time, but it is going through some transition right now with David's leadership. So let's talk a little bit about David, and then watch the clip so you learn a little bit about the Cedar Cultural Center and the work that he's doing there. So joining the Cedar Cultural Center in 2018 as the executive director, David led the organization on new organizational initiatives, including access for local artists of color, diversity and inclusion training, a commitment towards racial justice, and a new financial model, which helped create a multi-year financial surplus for the organization. Previously, David served as the Director of Operations for Augsburg University's Center for Global Education and Experience, where he was awarded for his work developing the center's work in experiential education, social justice, and community engagement. As a qualified administrator for the Intercultural Development Inventory, the IDI, David has worked on many diversity and inclusion initiatives. As a former executive director of Access Works, David led a cutting-edge social service agency providing harm reduction services to at-risk populations. David has an MA in African History from the University of Minnesota and a mini MBA for nonprofit organizations, which is from the University of St. Thomas, because I have that too. And David is also a very, very talented jazz pianist, even though he doesn't talk about that too much, but he is. I've seen him perform. He's a great pianist. So let's play the Cedars video, and let's learn a little bit about that organization.
Se dice de mí, y de se dice de mí, se di de mi ser exhibí. Desnuda ante ti, si soy así, fui así como así, yo soy así. Yo soy así. Yo soy así. Yo soy así.
تفوت ميديوان لتسنيت لدى الشكوى عناية ورني سنجي تسنة تبارد سكوز تران دغش النوان تينيري ساستنقم دك تفوت ميديوان لتسنيت لدى الشكوى عناية ورني سنجي تسنة تبارد سكوز تران دغش النوان
Wow. Yeah. I just want to dance now, but a little later for that. David, uh, so you became the ED of the Cedar Cultural Center, which is kind of a musical institution here in the Twin Cities. It's been around for what,
32 years.
32 years. So it's been around forever. It's in the West Bank area near the University of Minnesota in Augsburg, which right now is sort of a home base for a huge East African community. And although the institution itself has not always been reflective of its community. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about sort of the work that you've done and the organization has done to strengthen the connection with the community. And I know that we always get into this conversation about what world music is and what that means for the Cedar and that community as well. So maybe, checking in on that a little bit.
Yes. Looking back and thinking about what you said, I just reminded how old I am. I actually lived across the street from the Cedar when it opened in 1989. I was going to grad school at the U of M. Now, so I took over an institution that was known and for doing presenting global music in the hopes of creating intercultural understanding. Now, I'm going to highlight that because our mission was about intercultural understanding. I have experience working in that area, and I was probably hired a lot because of that experience. But interestingly enough, when I was hired, I told myself and the board and the staff that the Cedar's not ready to do racial justice work, and we didn't do it. I said we need to be more mindful and understanding of what we're trying to say we're doing with intercultural understanding and appreciation. And we have to think about what is global music. There's a kind of a problem there with the Eurocentric notion of what global music is. And to be upfront, our history was about presenting global artists largely to white audiences. That's the market for global music. We did a little something different when we did something really unique, which was work with the Somali community, because we're home to the largest Somali community outside of Mogadishu. With the Midnimo programming, we brought Somali artists who had never left parts of Somalia or Europe where they were in exile to come and perform in the US. That was a groundbreaking thing that Cedar did for many years. And very important with our connection with the Somali community. So I'm just thinking, I'm gonna jump around a lot. Thinking about the pandemic was one question, but I think we're going through a bigger transition because of George Floyd. George Floyd opened the door for the Cedar to really be mindful and impactful about what we are really trying to do. It allowed me to realize that I was going to have support from the larger community, the fundraising community, from the board, and from constituents to start doing some different work. So we moved to do a racial justice statement. And as some of you may know, that can mean many different things to many people. I was really mindful that it has to mean, it has to address disparities. It has to lead to change. And part of that has been seen in the fact that the 4 people I hired at the Cedar, since I've been there, have all been BIPOC. I had to challenge this whole idea of merit um, as kind of a hiring practice that can just support white supremacy. There was so many things that we had to really think of doing differently that we started to approach and do differently. I hired some great, super capable people, and that's not what challenging merit is about, not doing that, but it's about considering other things in the hiring process, including experience. And merit's not a good outcome of what performance will be anyway. So I had to argue that. But we've kind of been going through this huge transition in our work and our thinking, which has included, with the pandemic, we started thinking and realizing, the Cedar has the finances and the support to survive it, but that's meaningless if our community doesn't survive. The Somali community and their neighbors, and venues closing. And we have to be supportive of our neighbors and our community going forward. One thing that Dameun was a part of, which was kind of started before George Floyd, which was pretty amazing, is that we had an artist collective which brought in 6 BIPOC artists to do curating and advising to the Cedar on our operations, which was greatly impactful to how we operated. We started to really think about our mission and our work and our values. And I think it was the foreground to how we got to doing a racial justice statement. We started doing some new programming and thinking new ways to present artists. The goal was not just about how the Cedar reaches more communities. It was about how communities feel more a part of the Cedar. Different cultural communities, which is kind of problematic term. Sometimes we get stuck using problematic terms, but so we had different artists from different communities working with us that were not highly represented at the Cedar, local communities, particularly like the African American community or the Hmong community. And we did some really great and new things. Now, when George Floyd hit, that was completely evident. We handed over a newly created public access channel to the Artist Collective. And we had like Tu Psych Lee do a initial program on Black and Asian solidarity. What does BLM mean for the Hmong community? How can we work together? How can we do better? How do we understand each other and support each other? We had some groundbreaking programming happen. We started to really think about how we have to and need to do things differently in providing access to artists, to BIPOC artists. That's a racial justice move. It's about changing disparities. If BIPOC artists have more access, that's about supporting racial justice. It's just changing the outcome. So that's what we are moving forward to work on. A lot of that work will be through grants, because grants will support some of this work. And now we have this big movement now in the cities too. And it's great. A lot of organizations are realizing the great disparities that exist in the Twin Cities, and they want to support disparity. A lot of it's housing and education. Arts are kind of losing out in that, but we're also getting some support and seeing, we just saw what happened with McKnight and the great funding for, I think it was it 7 or 10 BIPOC organizations? That's amazing. 10? Sorry. I think someone put up 10.
I was clapping. Sorry. But yeah, you're about right. I think it's somewhere in that range.
Yeah. That's going to change the game for outcomes. And it's just an amazing thing that's happened in the last year with how we can move forward and do new things. And the Cedar is going through a huge change. The board, our new initiative requires that the board become 40% BIPOC. So the Cedar has this great history, and it's going to be a changing history, and it has to become a different history with the neighborhood and with our communities, and moving forward, that's more representative, more connected, and more engaged. And we're about to present a new First Nation series next month. We're going to be presenting Indigenous artists, or that's what the grant funding is called. We're allowing the artists to identify as they want to. Some have called themselves, wanted to call it the First Nation series. That's something that I can basically say without George Floyd, this wouldn't have happened. I don't know how to, sorry, I'm not describing without George Floyd, without this change that happened in realization and understanding from George Floyd, we probably wouldn't be presenting this series right now.
Well, yeah. I was
I'm kind of on a tangent. I'll
no. I was going to say, it's just, I mean, it's similar to what, Kino said, that because of all the work and the mutual aid and funds that were flowing in, he was able to open up Black Table Arts in that space. So there were some positive things that happened in the community of people coming together and trying to figure out new solutions. So yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing to say. It did come out of that. So I'll let you off the hook. So we'll continue the conversation. I think Vanessa had. Yeah.
Hey y'all, sorry to be late. We actually, somehow there was a miscommunication and we had advertised this as a 4 p.m. Central event. I don't know if it's at all possible for you all to stay. Sorry, I missed the beginning of the conversation, which I'm sure was awesome. I think we've been recording at least, but we have 35 people. We hope will come at 4 p.m. to hear you all. Is there any possibility for you all staying at least for some of it? And we so apologize for this. Is that okay? But we hope more people can be here for you and listen to your awesome work and stories. And maybe this was just a warm up. Make it an even more powerful sharing out. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your understanding and apologize for this, but we will have more people too, which will be fun. So we can stay and keep talking. We're pretty close to 4 as it is. Thank you for those that were here already. Hope you don't mind staying as well. I certainly encourage us to just keep talking if you have the time, but if you also want to take a little break off Zoom, understand that too.
Yeah.
David, are you good to stay too?
Yes,
Okay.
I plan to. We're dealing with an emergency roof issue today, which is going to block me from coming to that meeting early tomorrow morning, but I'll have to check some.
Oh, bummer. Okay.
Oh, emergency road. Well, okay. So one of the things I think we maybe hadn't discussed in a deep way, and so in some ways I think each of you touched on it, but it's really thinking about what it means. Well, Alondra, your space itself is not in the city of Minneapolis, and you live in St. Paul, not too far from me. But looking at sort of the city of Minneapolis, maybe for David and Kino and Alejandro, you've done work in Minneapolis and you have connections to the community there. What is it like sort of doing your work in a city that seems to also be in flux and experiencing a lot of challenges and need for change? How do you think that the work that you're doing in the communities can affect that change or help to organize your community members to force the necessary changes that are needed in the well, I'm going to say St. Paul needs those changes too, even though Minneapolis gets a lot of the press right now. But really, what impact do you think that your organization can have?
I'll say something. I think, I was just thinking, I was trying to come up with better words. I was like, we're both like the lube, the like story, the container. Like, I feel like for bold action, I think that the more ways that we can see each other take creative and leadership risks around doing our work at the intersections, at the edge, right, in relationship, that the more easefulness will be able to further complex conversations, be able to speak with each other in deeper, more transformative ways, which I think will enhance all of our organizing. I think our capacity to build a stronger web of community, which I feel like each of these spaces, whether it's whether it's the capacity of artists from and I really appreciate David's talk about even language, like we're calling it, First Nations, but it's like the language and the self-identification and what is a border. And I feel like, again, this is like in regards to sitting with my Native and Indigenous brothers and sisters in regards to these arbitrary borders that help us, just like assumptions and assumptions help us just get through some basic concepts together. But at the end of the day, the water flows and connects us all. And any sort of short change strategy or short-term fix, it's like I feel like, again, the water absorbs it, the soil absorbs it, and it also will spread it. And so I think that as our stories, the more we live our stories out loud, the more we name our learning. So in our cooperative organizing, like, oh, here we just found a little capitalism hack that has, a rule that has kept poor people from owning land. And if we organize this legal entity in this way and do money. So in sharing these stories, I think that like the changes that were, and then I think that there's words that we can say, there's statements that we can say post uprising, and that we need to keep saying them in these more institutionalized, quote unquote, professional spaces, so that we don't, like the ebb and flow of the tide, all of that is some natural, but going back too far is no longer an option, I think. And so I think the more bold we are with our storytelling of either of the pieces of the performance, themes, the better we will all be in this work.
Well, I love that. I mean, to me, I think that storytelling is the power. And yeah, I wrote down the same words that Vanessa put in the chat. Is that capitalism hack? I love that. And I think when I was talking to Kino earlier in the visit to Black Table Arts, the way that he was describing, I was just like, well, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I think, if we think of capitalism as that extension, I still go, I'm like the chicken or the egg, but as an extension of white supremacy, we definitely need a hack. This is the time for hacks. So I'm really curious about some of the words, the other words in vocabulary that we can say now in these spaces. I feel like the term abolition is one that I say more and feel like saying more. Liberation has always been there. That word has always been there, but it seems reserved for certain spaces. But I feel like that time has passed now as well. David, thinking of the Cedar Cultural Center and where you're located, and really some of the challenges that we've had for a long time in the West Bank and with the East African community. How much of a space of sort of organizing has the Cedar become for the community? do they look to that space as a space of home now or belonging, or is that something that you're working towards? So,
Okay, I'll tell you a few things we're working for. As far as a space for the community, we do offer a community discount for usage of our space, like a discounted rental rate. A few important things we're doing with the community is um, one, we have two artists who've been long associated with the Cedar, and one of them is Harvey.
hmm
He goes as Harvey. He's a Somali musician, drummer, international,
amazing.
well known. Yes, he's part of our artist collective and a long-term performer at the Cedar. He is one of two educators that are going into Somali child care centers supported by the Cedar to teach the youth about Somali culture and history and music and poetry and singing and dancing. And they bring in drums that we supplied. We just started that program up today again after the long break from COVID. We want to expand that to have them go into a great diversity of schools, and people want them to come to other schools. It's an amazing after-school program that was originally funded from the State Arts Board, and we're going to be looking to getting other funding for it or cover some of the funding internally. One of the commitments we made during the pandemic was to support the artist collective ongoing, and how we are actually doing that. We actually have two artists we're still supporting of the artist collective. One is Alex Buffalo Head, who is working on our First Nations series with us. She's curating that, and I'm working to create a Black music series later this year when we finish with this First Nations series. But back to the community. We were working in the Riverside Tower right behind us, the towers, doing the after-school program. However, the school had a few problems, and we had to move it to a few childcare centers on Lake Street that are, completely Somali run and owned. We want to expand it, as I mentioned. We also support I shouldn't say just support, because he was his own initiative, a gentleman who comes to our plaza and works with youth. Now, our plaza is a community space, and that's how we set it up. And as you know, in any community, we have a lot of different views about the police and the youth, and challenges that are internal that are going on in the Black community. It's not as simply as to say that the Black community is against the police or wants to defund the police, as we just saw what happened with some of the backlash from the North community activists against the city council for not getting adequate support on their movement to engage the community before they went forward with talks of defunding or abolishing the police. Anyways, those conversations are going on with Somali elders. I met with two Somali elder musicians today who said, "You need more police." Now, so we're dealing with a lot of, and we want to say, as my view of working with the community is, the community leads these discussions and directs us on how to do the work.
Yeah.
So that'll be an ongoing conversation. We've never had police or security at events. Things are a little different now. We have to have that discussion. Anyways, there is a gentleman who works in our plaza who we were able to financially support at times last year, and now we're thinking of a way to continually support him. He works with the youth. He knows all the youth. He tries to help them. He brings food every Friday. We want a relationship with him and to put him on staff to work all of our shows. He's a community person who can work with the youth in a non-police way. That's what we want to have going forward. So that's one way we're doing things. We've had the police say, we want you to put no trespassing signs on your plaza so then we can come on and arrest the youth, or, and we said, no, that's not going to fix anything or help the youth.
No. It just gets them into that cycle that they don't need to be in.
Yeah. Now, one of our artist collective members, Ifra Mansour, who's well known in the community, did an amazing event in which he had a traditional Somalia call on our plaza last year. Again, one of these things that happened with the artist collective that we would have never dreamed of doing. groundbreaking artist event where she set it up to work with the elders, to have them do poetry and storytelling. And what happened was a lot of youth became engaged in it, and were asking her about this traditional hut and helped her build it. And she had all community people help her with it. And we're gonna, I haven't told her yet, we're gonna re-engage her to come back and do some work on the plaza. And we have a possible funding source to do it.
Oh, that's great.
Another thing we need to continue doing. So those types of things that we can do with the community are very exciting. When the gentleman across the street was killed recently, very unfortunate situation, we held the vigil on our plaza. Many of us spoke. A huge GoFundMe was set up, and I got the board to help us donate $1,000 towards his, support of his children.
Yeah.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
We're a bit past 4, so we're actually gonna restart here.
Okay.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.